Hi everyone. In today's philosophical ethics video, I want to discuss euthanasia and morality. Before we really dig into this, we have to understand what euthanasia is. Euthanasia seeks to provide a suffering patient with a painless death. There are two types of euthanasia that I will be discussing in this video. The first type of euthanasia is passive euthanasia. Passive euthanasia is essentially letting a patient die, letting someone die. To do this, one will withhold the means that's keeping a patient alive, such as a ventilator or a feeding tube. The next type of euthanasia is active euthanasia. Active euthanasia essentially stops the patient's suffering through more immediate and more direct means. Essentially, with active euthanasia, you are killing someone who expresses that they wish to be killed. One might do this through a lethal dosage of some drugs. Now we have to ask ourselves, well, is euthanasia morally permissible? Some advocates of passive euthanasia argue that yes, euthanasia is morally permissible. And there are many ways that passive euthanasia is justified. We wouldn't want to prolong someone's suffering, especially when there's no cure or no relief to that suffering. Many of us would find it cruel. So to justify passive euthanasia, we may need to state the conditions in which it is okay to let someone die. Some of these conditions may be if someone is dying and they live in constant pain and suffering, and there's no relief to this pain and suffering, and the patient expresses that they wish to die, and the people surrounding the patient believe that it may be better for the patient to die, then that is the situation, or those are the situations where it is morally permissible to let someone die. But now when we consider active euthanasia, we have to ask ourselves, is that morally permissible? Well, the famous philosopher, James Rachel, says yes, active euthanasia is morally permissible. He says active euthanasia and passive euthanasia are different, sure, because of their means, but they have the same goal in mind. It is to respect someone's wishes and let them pass. Now, obviously, there are some objections to passive euthanasia. The first objection I want to cover is, well, with active euthanasia, you are killing someone, and killing is wrong. Well, you're right. In most cases, killing is wrong. But when we talk about euthanasia, these patients aren't really living the best lives. They're living lives of suffering. So to prolong that suffering by keeping them alive, it's cruel. The final objection I want to cover is essentially saying when someone says, well, there's a big difference between passive euthanasia and active euthanasia. And this big difference is why passive euthanasia is morally permissible and active euthanasia is not morally permissible. This big difference that they're referring to is the act of letting something happen versus doing something. And James Rachel essentially says, well, I don't know about that one. He says there isn't really letting something happen and doing something, there may not be a distinction between the two. An example of this would go as two sons want to inherit their father's wealth. In order to do this, they'd have to get rid of their parents. Son A decides that he wants to drown his father, and so he does. Son B, on the other hand, decides, I need to drown my mother, but he finds that his mother is already drowning, and so he lets his mother drown. Now, when someone asks son B, well, what did you do? And the son B claims, well, I didn't do anything. But he did, he stood there. And in doing nothing is doing something. Letting someone die, the point of this is that a way to kill someone is to let them die. So the distinction between the two isn't really clear. So in summary, death is arguably a bad thing, especially for the person who dies, right? But when we talk about euthanasia, euthanasia acts as a means of mercy. As I previously said, there are many ways to justify euthanasia. Well, I challenge you to look up philosophical principles and see if those principles justify euthanasia. With that, I thank you for checking out this video, and I wish you the best of luck on your philosophical journey.